Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and
عليكم
gents,
السلام.
welcome to a new episode of the podcast حكايتي حكاية. Our guest today is Faris Kafi, an Algerian from ورقلة, currently living and working in Dubai. He is currently the managing director of Transforma Training Center. Faris holds a license degree in English language from the University of ورقلة in Algeria. In 2014, he immigrated to Dubai. Was it in 2014?
Correct, yeah.
And since then, he has had an extensive experience in teaching English as ESL, as EFL, as ESP in the UAE. I've known Faris back when he was a student at the university, and in ورقلة, he's also my neighbor. And I'm very happy to have him today to talk about his professional career, about his story with the English language, and about his experience as a teacher and as a trainer and as a professional in the field of English language teaching, English language learning, and also right now, of course, about his managerial roles and his transition from an English language teacher and trainer to a soft skills builder and trainer. Faris, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me over.
Thank you very much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Is it today is Sunday? Is it the weekend there?
Yes, it is. Actually, they've changed the weekend. It was Friday, Saturday. Now it's Saturday, Sunday. Correct.
Did they? Since when?
It's been around 3 months for no, like the beginning of the year.
Okay. I always thought that they had a Saturday and Sunday.
No, they didn't before.
So
Now
they had
Sunday
like
is
the
on Friday.
Algerian system. It's the same. The Algerian weekend they had.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. The fact that, especially Dubai is like an international city with a lot of expatriates, I always thought that they had the Saturday and Sunday. So that argument for changing the weekend is obviously that it's more convenient for business.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's because of the stocks, the stocks are international and people all around the world, or let's say the productive, countries have their Sundays off. So now it's just like, we're following the economic system here. But still, there are some Emirates that have Friday off. Like
Okay.
Sharjah, for example, still has Friday off, and it has 3 weekends. Like let's say Friday,
Really?
Saturday, and Sunday. Yeah.
Wow. This is the first time I hear about a 3 days weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's the first time. So not all the Emirates have the same weekend now. No.
No.
And it's only Dubai that changed.
Dubai, Abu Dhabi, there are 7 Emirates in the UAE, so all the 7 Emirates have changed. However, Sharjah still stands on a solid ground when it comes to Friday.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because
But
Sharjah is a bit more well, Dubai is international, and the UAE is an international country. So people from around the world, come and live here, and so the international standards require Sunday to be off.
yeah, then
That's
this is why,
as far as I know.
and this is why I was surprised that they've done this only lately. That is, I've
Yeah.
always imagined that this is something that they've done years ago, given the fact that Dubai is so much integrated into the world economy, and that it is mostly populated by expatriates and by businesses from around the world. So I was really, when you told me now that they've changed only like what, like 7 months ago, since
Yeah.
January. So this is like 7 months ago because now we are in August. By the way, we are in August. How is the weather there? Is it
Uh,
hot?
Pretty humid, more
Humid.
than hot. Yeah, like it's
You are
very
from
humid.
Wergla, so you know hot and humid and dry. You can
I
compare.
can stand the
So
heat.
what's the weather like? What's the weather like there in comparison to Wergla, which is very hot in the summer?
Wergla is hotter. However, you can stand the weather in Wergla, but here,
Yeah,
it's very humid. You know, the level of humidity is a bit high. Wergla is dry,
it's dry.
so
Yes,
yeah, so the heat in Wergla is let's say bearable. Okay, but
it's
Wergla is
bearable.
hotter.
It's
Yeah,
bearable. You bearable and you don't sweat a lot. I
yeah.
was talking to this teacher in one of the episodes, and he's from, not from, but currently, he's from Algeria, but currently working and living in Kuwait City.
Oh my
And
God.
he talked about how it is hell out there, but it's
Yeah,
not only because it's hot, it's also because it's very humid. And so he was
true.
talking to me about how this is that he can't go outside. He literally can't go outside. It's impossible. And about how out in the desert, there are places where it can go up to 70. And I was like, 70 Fahrenheit? And he said, no, 70 Celsius. I was like, what?
Yeah, yeah. Wergla is actually in competition with Kuwait. You know, like especially when it comes
It
to heat.
is. It
Yeah,
is. And we were talking about this. We were talking about how sometimes in between like July and August, Wergla is in the top 10. And he was, this is one of the hardest places in the on the face of the earth. And I said, yeah, that happens here too.
yeah.
But they have another problem, which is sandstorms. They have sandstorms. So I don't think that Dubai has that problem. No, because they are
Um,
very close to Iraq and to Baghdad.
yeah. Mm. It's rare here. You know, like the
Where?
storms are rare because of the buildings, because of the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
skyscrapers. You know, like
yeah,
the
yeah.
high buildings and so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. So they block the sand and they block the sandstorms. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they are built actually is architecturally speaking, they're there to stand, you know, all the sandstorms and keep them outside the
Mm-hmm.
zone of the city. I mean,
Sure. And this is, but where he's living right now, that is, I think, between March and April, which is the sandstorm season here also in Wergla. But there it's like something out of this world because
yeah,
it doesn't start there, actually, there in Kuwait City, but it actually starts, he said, from Baghdad or the Iraqi region, and then it comes to them. And I said, yeah, I've seen some sandstorms in Baghdad, and they are like, this is doomsday. It literally looks like that.
yeah.
When I see videos, I'm like, here in Wergla, our sandstorms are cute.
That's right. That's right. You know, the whole sky becomes red, and you feel like it's the end of the world. You know, like
Yeah,
that's
but
it. Yeah,
so imagine those sandstorms that they have in Baghdad that they show on TV when you have big, very huge clouds coming on the city and covering everything. And they have, I was surprised the other day when I saw a documentary and they said
yeah,
that they have to stop teaching, going to school. They have to stop everything. Like
yeah,
kids
yeah.
don't go to school. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is a real sandstorm.
It feels like in a movie. You know,
Yeah, well,
it's
uh,
yeah, it's pretty
well,
hard.
Faris, let's start from the beginning. I want to start with your story with the English language. So, how did you learn English? Now, I know that many people have different stories about how did they learn English. Obviously, you have picked up an American accent. It's very obvious. So, what's your story with the English language? How did you learn it? Was it at school? Did you do this on your own? Did you get help? What's your story with the English language? Let's start from there.
Yeah. So English actually has been a language that I loved, and I really wanted to learn it because of the movies that I watched as a kid,
What
and
were
then it
your
grew
favorite movies back then?
action movies.
Action movies,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I like the fighting and the martial arts.
Yeah, it's the same,
Yeah,
but well, yeah, when you are a kid, that's what you love.
yeah. That's
Action
right.
movies
That's
are
right.
the best. Hmm.
Yeah. So I felt like the strength was there, like you. I mean, it's not only the muscles; it's also the language.
Hmm.
So yeah, I grew an interest in the English language, especially after, or let's say at middle school. I had a great teacher actually back then. I don't know if you know her, Bayud.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She actually, and there is another one that's called Buzian. I still didn't forget them. They marked me. Back then, they gave me great feedback, and in terms of learning the language and so on and so forth. And because it's not because I was the smartest kid in the class, it's just because everybody else didn't raise any interest in the language,
Hmm.
and it was like a free time for us. So back then, I really wanted to learn the language. I really wanted to speak it as well as the movies.
Hmm.
Then when I went to high school, I started having like let's say a crush on English,
Hmm.
I started listening to music, to songs, hip hop, R&B, and so on and so forth. That time the MP3 was created, and it was exposed in markets, and I bought one. Like you put that battery, and that battery
Yeah.
dies quickly. So I went to school. I went to high school with that MP3 and listening to music and trying to rap with them and trying to sing with them at the same time, trying to repeat what the singer was saying. Um, until actually once I remember uh, the battery died, and I didn't have the money, actually to buy the battery, another battery. So I had to put the earpieces, like in order to listen to the music. So I just put the earpiece without the MP3 because I left it at home, and I put it in my pocket, and I walked down the street going to the high school. And I actually, back then, didn't want to ride a car, or I just wanted to walk. Walk to school, and I started trying to sing, and so that people don't say that I was crazy. I had the yeah. I tried to speak to myself. I tried to communicate in English, and walking down the street. At that
Hmm.
time, I wanted to communicate. Like it was only receptive for me, and receptive, and I tried to imitate as well in order for me to be able to speak. But however, I couldn't speak. I couldn't speak
Mm.
that time. I couldn't
Mm.
make a conversation. I couldn't strike it. So I reached a point where Skype was there. So I tried to look for names. Um, I tried to look for people in order to speak with them the language. And this is a problem, by the way. Like a lot of people would like to learn speaking, but they can't find a person that to speak with.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I typed a lot of different names. Skype back then had the option of looking for different people, even if you don't know them. So I tried to type names of Americans, of foreigners. I didn't know the difference. I didn't understand the difference back then, between British and Americans. So I found this guy called Bill, Bill Ormshire. He's an old fella. He was in his 60s back then. I'm talking 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I guess. So this guy was actually an angel from sky. He was a stock investor, and he had a long time on his PC. So when I found him, he was actually bored. So he just he needed someone to speak to.
Okay.
So yeah, when I popped up, he started speaking to me in English. Hello, how are you? This and that. I couldn't answer, like that was my first encounter with a foreigner. So whenever I see him smile, I say yes. Whenever I see him angry or poker face, I just say no. Those are the only two words that I used with him in the beginning, because I had that, language barrier, especially his accent. I couldn't understand anything that he was saying, especially when you are, when you are targeted with a certain speech and certain questions, you can't answer.
Sure.
So yeah, and then later on, he understood that I didn't understand him. So he wrote a question: do you speak English? I said no. He said, do you want me to teach you? I said yes.
Did he propose that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
You are lucky. That doesn't happen often.
I was pretty lucky.
that
that
you would just, type a name on Skype and then get a guy, and the guy is American and you are interested in English, and then the guy is going to say, do you want me to teach you? And you say, of course.
Actually he gave me an appointment. He said it was 8 p.m. Algerian time back then, from 8 to 10. He always gave me these 2 hours every day, every single day. He never missed
every day, 2
class.
hours.
He never missed. Even if he missed, he would talk to his wife, and his wife would sit with me, because it was a commitment that he made.
Well, that's quite a story. I mean,
it is.
This doesn't happen often. And when you were having these sessions with him, or these chats with him for 2 hours, how was he teaching you the language?
He would speak most of the time, and he would write, some 3 words, 4 words, for example, down in the chat box, and I would write them down because I had my notebook. I'd write them down, and he would say, you need to learn them in English, not in your language.
Sure.
Yeah.
That is, use the English language.
Exactly.
Even in the when you would look for the word, you would look for it in an English dictionary, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you think this has helped you? That is, your contact and exposure to native speaker language, accent.
Listening. Because that was the first exposure, actually, for me, especially back then when I was trying to, and still we're learning every day.
How old were you at that time? You were like teenager?
I was 15,
something like 15. That. Okay. And I guess back at that time, YouTube was not yet the thing, right? It wasn't.
No.
So now you can get exposure to the language mostly from YouTube, especially to natural language, because, we talk about movies, but movies are not always natural. Like these are good, but they are not natural. Like this is scripted, and then this is acting. But now on YouTube, you can get natural speech. And so you were exposed to that early on, before there was that. That's good. Yeah.
And I realized something, when the speech is directed to you, your brain works faster than if the speech is somewhere else, like on TV, for example.
That's
two people
interesting.
are speaking.
How do you think this helped you? That is, the fact that he was talking to you and addressing you, and the way you have absorbed at that time the language or the accent, or how do you think this really helped you?
There was a point where I had to understand everything faster. I had to answer at the same time, and I didn't want to look like an idiot. So yeah, he would speak fast, naturally, because they're not like British people. British people, would slow down a little bit.
Sure.
Because they would think that you don't understand or something. But the Americans know. The Americans, it's their natural, pace. So he would keep the same pace, and I would, I would want to, keep up with that pace. So this made my brain think at the same time, like I need to answer now. I need to answer immediately. But listening as a listening practice, like you listen from TV, you listen from, I don't know, like to songs, for example. The speech is not addressed to you, as you said, and it's not directed to you. So your brain just works in a very slow, harmony where you just need to understand. That's all, because you don't have to answer. If you are directed by that speech, if you're addressed, you will need to do double work. Your brain needs to understand and needs to reply at the same time.
And like there is, yeah, and like there is listening for a purpose. This is what we want usually when we are listening. We want like a purpose. Otherwise, we are just taking things in. We don't have any. Sometimes, if you are engaged in a conversation like I am right now, I'm listening to every word and I'm absorbing every word. And sometimes if I'm not engaged, I don't mean these kind of conversations, but other conversations that I've had, even in English, if I'm not engaged, I understand what the person is saying in terms of speaking in English, but my brain is not taking in anything because I'm not engaged. There is no interest, there is no purpose.
You would call this the active listening versus the passive listening.
Exactly.
Yeah. The active listening is the one that helps people a lot. It's the one actually that gives you the luxury of trying to get all the words from your subconscious and convert them into the conscious in order for you to be able to reply. There is a bridge that has to be built between the subconscious, because that's where memory is, and that's where we store our words, the terminology. Now, if you, for example, hypnotize a person that learns a lot of words, a lot of terminology, you would know that they have a lot of terminologies, a lot of vocabulary. But the problem is that there is a block in here, which is called translation. So they have to translate first. They have to understand, in order for them to say so the gap fillers, they use the gap fillers in order for them to bridge between the subconscious and the conscious. So it takes a big effort for them in order to be able to speak and communicate properly.
And I'm curious. I'm still curious about. So how long have you done this for? 2 hours, you said every day, didn't miss a day. How long did you do this for?
Can you believe it? It was only for 6 months.
Only? 6 months is a long time. Only? I thought you were going to say it was only for 6 days. No, 6 months is a long time.
6 months fully committed. Fully devoted.
No, 6 months is a long time. Now you will find the teacher following you for 6 months now. Like they will follow you for like 3 months and then say, okay, you are on your own.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But at the end of these 6 months, how did your English improve?
By the end of those 6 months, actually, like there was an interruption in the connection between us, because he had a financial crisis, and the stocks were really down. and he would also almost lose his house in Texas, Plano. So, like, let's say 3 months
I think this
later,
was back in 2008.
no, it was actually later. It was
Okay.
2015, 16, I guess. There was a crush in the stock market.
Yeah, because
Um,
the crash in the stock market, I thought you were talking about the 2018, 2008, sorry,
yeah.
crash.
There was a 2008 crash, and there was a 2000. The 2008 crash was actually real estate plus stocks.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It
And
hit the
this one
world.
was only stocks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think even it was only in the American market. So
Hmm.
3 months later, he would call me. Okay, he would call me on the phone, and I just start like speaking to him in English, and he would just start crying for
Mm,
5 minutes straight.
my
Like he would
God,
keep crying
like
because
depressed.
no, he felt like he achieved something with this person. Like he said, "Is that
You
you
were
really?"
talking about the English language. I thought you were talking about the stocks. You were
No, no.
talking about yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You were talking about your level in English.
yeah,
He
yeah.
would cry. That
I
is,
swear.
that is your. This would say something about your level by after 6 months, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like
And
he
it
he he
started.
didn't believe it.
So it started with saying yes, no to communicating.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now the essential question there: do you think that 6 months of communicating for, let's say, an average of an hour, okay, with a native speaker can take your English language level to from zero to intermediate easily? That is this something that you can say for sure can happen?
I can really vouch on that. Like I would say 6 months straight, fully committed, fully devoted. I wouldn't say 1 hour because that would have to spread out throughout the day.
Yeah, this is why I said
Um,
an average
yeah,
of one
like
hour,
you
an
live the
average.
language, you
Yeah, yeah,
live
yeah.
it.
Hmm.
So, for example, let's say you watch a video in the morning after you have breakfast, and then you
So
would
you
go
were
to.
doing other activities at the same time.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mm,
Read a book, for
with
example.
the book.
So there are two receptive skills, as you know. So the listening and the reading are all about reception, and speaking and writing are all about productivity. So what would happen, like during my day back then, was that I learned words, I read a text, I listened to something, and in the evening I would talk to him. Like I would show him productivity.
Mm, hmm, hmm, hmm.
Yeah, so we would talk on a certain subject. For example, let's say poverty, let's stocks, for example, economy. We would just bring up any topic and start speaking about it. But the provided that the topic that we speak about is something that I practiced in the morning,
Sure,
for example,
sure.
during the day.
So that you had
But
something to say about the topic.
exactly.
Okay. So during this time and during the time when you were learning English, that is from beginner to, let's say, intermediate,
Yeah.
whether you were having these conversations with this guy or other activities, did you intentionally study the grammar and the pronunciation?
Never.
Never,
Never.
never. So you didn't like take I don't know, a course. When I say a course, I mean a book like with exercises in phonetics, in pronunciation, in the tenses. No.
I didn't find it necessary. However, I studied at a private school there,
At
in ورقلة.
here Hassi School?
Has Hasi school, yes.
Yes, with
But
Mr.
it,
Sammut.
some mode, right? So
Hmm.
the methodology was totally different. It wasn't only grammar; it was communication based.
Yes.
They wouldn't, like they didn't teach us something like, let's say, for example, present simple. Let's do present simple. I am, you are,
Yeah.
he is, she is.
It's not like at school.
Exactly. So they
Mhm.
would just, give us conversational, materials. They would just push us to speak. That
So
was
you
all
you
about it.
did you studied at the private school, at the language school, at the same time that you were talking or having these conversations with the guy, same time you were
Correct.
doing the reading activities, listening and watching and listening to music, all of this. So you were
But
basically living English.
yeah, there is a point here. I didn't do it because I had to do it. I did it
Yeah.
because I enjoyed it.
This is why I said you were living English.
Yeah,
This
correct.
this was not for your school, like an assignment
Absolutely
or
not.
something like that. This is something that you wanted to do. After your formative years at the middle school, high school, then you chose English, of course,
I,
university. Did
yeah,
you?
I wanted translation. I wanted interpretation. Like that
Okay.
back then. But the unluckily, like I had a where the translation was removed actually from the options at university back then. So I had to go, for English because that was the second option directly after translation. So I always wanted to go to the UN and be a translator and an interpreter, at the same time. So I always watched Al Jazeera English, for example, back then, and I saw the person, interpreting,
Translating.
the yeah, the talks on the shows and the UN, how people were doing it. But now I don't have that passion anymore.
No.
And yeah, thankfully, I studied English, and luckily as well, I went through a certain path, which is the teaching path.
Hmm.
Um,
So talk to me
but
about that. Now you've chosen English as your major, but I think that while you were studying, you were also teaching.
yeah,
Were you?
correct.
Yeah, and this
Yes,
happens a lot with English language students.
students, yes,
A
yes.
lot of them who love the language start teaching early on when they are studying at the same time. So, what was your first experience with teaching?
Um, Back then, I was given a, I was actually called by Samud, and this was at Hazard School, and he said, "Why don't you come over for an interview? Let me
Hmm.
talk to you a little bit." So I went there, and I remember I was painting the wall, so I had a lot of paints on my clothes. So I just went there and started talking about how much I wanted to teach, and he gave me actually the chance, to start this endeavor, and I was pretty happy about it because it was a new experience. It was something that and by the way, teaching was actually something that advanced me in the language.
Sure.
Yeah.
But before that, did you want to teach? That is this something that was in the realm of possibilities for you? You said that
No.
you wanted to become a translator, which is basically the same thing with me when I got my baccalaureate. That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to do. And basically, it's the same thing for me too, eventually. And right now, I'm saying, thank God I didn't do that. Yeah. And when you started teaching at, was it at Hassi School?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a private language school for those who don't live in ورقلة, of course, and are listening to this. So how was your first experience with teaching? Did you teach kids or teenagers or
No. No.
or
You know
adults?
surprisingly, I taught adults only.
Okay.
Like especially my first class, I remember it till now. They were doctors from university that not English, of course, but other specialties that
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to learn the language, and they were surprised, and they didn't like it. They didn't like the fact that there was a youngster teaching them. However, they loved it later on.
And so, what was your experience with teaching at the beginning? Were there difficulties that you have found?
Yeah.
How did you overcome them? So
the first difficulty that anybody would find in teaching is actually public speaking.
sure.
When you stand in front of people, that is the first fear that comes to any person that starts teaching for the first time. You stand up in front of people and you start giving them information that you're not sure about, maybe. So you're afraid of questions because you're a teacher, so you
Sure.
have to receive questions.
Sure.
It's either you would know how to answer them or not. So preparation, you have to do a lot of preparation before your class, but you don't anticipate the questions that come from the students. You're not familiar with the level of the students. I'm talking about the first class that you
Sure.
ever teach. It was actually very difficult. I couldn't sleep that day. I couldn't sleep that night. Sorry.
I understand. I
Yeah.
totally do because I had the
Right.
same experience basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to think about what to give them. Are they gonna like me? This is one of the bad thoughts that came to my mind. Are they gonna like me? Am I gonna make a good impression as a teacher, or am I not? People are gonna understand me? Am I gonna speak in English only, or am I gonna use Arabic as well? So these are a lot of questions that came to my mind, before the first class. Then when I went in the first class, there were some practices, of teaching that I didn't know. For example, taking the marker and using the board, the whiteboard. You don't have them if you don't have experience. You don't have
Sure.
that let's say explanatory sense. When you stand up in front of people and somebody doesn't understand a certain word, you don't automatically go to the board and write it. So it's because you don't have the best practices.
Sure, because you are a novice teacher. This is
Exactly.
your first time, and so the different practices that are effective are not there yet, and they
Yeah.
have to develop over time, of course. And so, how do you think over the years, you have, over the first years, how do you think you have overcome all of these difficulties?
I have overcome the difficulties by the advice of my mentors. The Samuds, like him and his wife, actually. They followed me step by step, and they would always give me feedback on what I do, and they would say, the feedback is the breakfast of champions. So you would take the feedback and you try to practice upon it, because they knew back then that I didn't have experience, so they just followed me and they mentored me through.
But you had
teaching.
all the potential.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you graduated from the University of ورقلة with the licence, I think in 2014?
Yeah. No, 2013.
2013. And then what did you do? Did you first, because I know you immigrated and you went to Dubai in 2014. So talk to me about that year when you graduated and then immigrated. How did the decision come by? Because it's early on. It's really early on when you were young, just graduate, fresh graduate. So which is quite unusual. Usually when I talk to, and in this podcast, I have talked so far, I think, to 5 or 6 expatriates, most of them teachers. That is, they have an experience in teaching in Algeria, and then they decide to immigrate. But for you, it was immediate. So how did the decision come about, or was it from the beginning something that you really wanted to do?
No, I didn't actually want to do it, but back then I never wanted to teach at a regular school, at a public school.
Okay.
I never saw myself there, especially when I see our fellow teachers.
Educational system.
Not pretty much that, but especially when I see the circumstances of the teachers over there.
Sure.
I feel bad. I feel bad for them. Like they don't. Well, when I graduated, I actually wanted to pursue my master's degree, and then I realized that I'm just doing this because it's a process. I'm not doing
that is,
it
you have
because
to do it. This is something that is, you are supposed to do it. Now you got your license. Now you
exactly.
got the
Primary
master's.
school, middle school, high school, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, and you
I
keep on
see.
going.
But how did you realize that? That is, how did you see that? You said, this path, I don't want to take this path. Because it's not something easy to come to as a decision. So, but how did you have discussions? Did you?
When I knew that having a master's degree wouldn't, well, let me not say wouldn't be of help, but it wouldn't make such a big difference unless you have experience in the field. Why? Because if you are a teacher, for example, let's forget a little bit about teaching. If you're a manager, okay, and you take a BA, business administration, you would graduate and go take experience in the same field. They would require 3 years minimum experience, and then you would go back to the MBA. Why would you do the MBA? It's because there are advanced or a bit more advanced notions that you need to take. However, you cannot take them unless you see the gap through practice. So as a teacher, you need to see the gaps, okay? And then you go and take the master's, and then you practice, and then you see the gap, and then you go take the PhD. So the PhD is something, very high leveled. It's not a successive thing to do. Like, it's not about taking the master's and then going to the PhD. It's about taking the master's, taking the experience or the enough experience, and then doing the PhD, because they're not only titles that we'd like to take. They are, let's say, knowledge. It's
sure.
It's a bit more advanced knowledge. However, you wouldn't appreciate it if you still haven't taken enough experience in the field.
That would justify or motivate the necessity of having that particular major, that particular diploma, or that particular certificate, yes. Right?
Yes.
But what I'm curious about is, was this mindset something that you had really back at that time when you graduated? You said, no, I want to go out and discover the world first, and then see if this is going to add anything or have an added value to my personality or to my skills or to what I need? Or was it something that you said, okay, I don't need for now, and let me see what I can do with? That is, were you more interested in the job opportunities and the career than in studies? And so you said, no, I don't need a master's now. And you have proven that. I think that you are, and this is why حكاية, which is the title of this, the name of this podcast, you are living proof that you don't need like degrees to succeed in your professional career, because you've been recruited by many different companies and institutions, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But I'm curious about what was the mindset right after you graduated, because to have this mindset when you graduate, it's something that perhaps you realize later on, but when you graduate, you most of the time think like everybody else.
Yeah. Your question has two sides. So the first side is actually what motivated me to stop and come here to Dubai, for example, and travel abroad. And the second side is
that being the consequence of not like having no interest in your studies, and that's where not in your studies, but in having like a master's, is saying, no, I don't want that yet. So I guess my question here is, there are a lot of people who pursue masters not because they are interested in the masters, but because they have to do it. It's just like a social, it's just like a social requirement. And as you said, neither their level nor their motivation is there to study the masters. So what I see, especially now, is people like having the masters and they've attended no classes at all. And this is the worst thing ever. And the same for the PhD. And I totally agree with you that unless you don't see really a gap in your professional career, in your practices, in your experience that would motivate you to do that, there is no pressure to do it. But to the people who are listening to this, who are watching this, this is quite an unusual experience that you've had when you said, no, I want to stop here. But I'm curious about that particular decision. How was it made? Was it something difficult? Was it something that you thought about a lot? Did you have some pushback? That's what I want to know about. Especially that you were an excellent student. It's not like you wouldn't have you wouldn't be accepted into a master's here or elsewhere.
I was accepted actually. I had a good ranking, especially back then. But the problem was not either I take the masters or I go to it wasn't an option for me. It wasn't something optional. I wanted to make a decision back then. I wanted to make a decision. It was either I enter the professional world and forget a little bit, because I didn't expect that I would spend more than 2 years abroad. When I wanted to travel, I just wanted to travel for experience, 2 years, and come back in order to continue my master's degree and so on and so forth.
So it was for you. It was on hold. Let's say it was on hold. Okay, I get it now.
Let me tell you, the opportunity of free education does not happen everywhere.
Yeah, sure. No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all.
It costs a lot for you to study elsewhere.
My God, yes.
Yeah. Sure. So I mean, people seize the opportunity of free education and keep on studying and studying and studying over and over. If you ask them what would their motive be, they wouldn't know, because it's just they don't have something to stop them and have them think a little bit about what they want to do in the future. Like there are a lot of, let me tell you this. When I came here, the first 2 years, I saw a lot of different stuff. For example, apart from teaching English, there is something else called training. There is teaching and training. I didn't discover this till I came here. So teaching is to teach something, and training is to train a skill, right? Teaching to teach a language, and training to train a skill. And then I realized that there are some other professional diplomas that you can take in order for you to develop or improve your positioning in the training field. For example, there is CELTA, if you'd like to, to rank up a little bit, in the teaching field.
There's sometimes that there is Delta.
So Delta is something else. Like when you go to international companies, they're not going to ask you for your master's degree. They're going to ask you for professional diplomas. They're going to ask you for professional certificates. Like they wouldn't say, hey, do you have a master's degree? They would say, do you have a CELTA?
Yeah. So and here I think we come to a very important question of value. That is, where is value? And the more you invest in value, the better, because there are some people who invest in things that have no value, neither for them, like in terms of personal satisfaction, nor for their professional career. For example, I have many students who come to me, they finish their license. I say, hey, sir, I've seen this like master's degree in Indonesia. Should I go for it? I would say, why would you go to Indonesia to study a master's? Why would you do that? Why? Like, is it just for the adventure, or is it for... Why would you invest time and money and effort and being like far away from home in studying a master's in Indonesia? Why would you do that? And I ask the question because I want to see if they have any kind of answer for it. And usually they are like, I don't know. I guess it's good because it's abroad. And so it's very important to be aware of the value of what we are doing. That is, if you want to do a master's in Indonesia because they told you right after you finish your master's in Indonesia, we are going to give you a house and a car and the job at the university here, then do it. Sure.
Exactly. Sure. But
just do it like that, I don't see. And so I think you are raising a very important issue there, especially for our young graduates who are of course confronted to such questions about their careers, about their choices. Yes.
Before thinking about the master's degree, I would give this very important advice. Learn the language. Learn the language. It's very, very important and critical. It's even worse if you say I have a master's degree and you don't master the language.
That's the key point. I think
you gotta master the language first, and then you master like you use the language in something. You monetize your bachelor's degree, and then you move on to investing in yourself again in order to have more income, more revenue. You cannot just think about education as a successive thing that's I'm bored, let me just continue because I still haven't found a job. The job still hasn't come and knocked on my door. And no, it's not about that. It's about you taking your bachelor's degree, you investing in yourself, stop a little bit, master the language to the fullest, and then you go and monetize that experience, that educational experience. And then after that, you move on to the master's, because now what people think is I would graduate and say I have a master's in order for me to get a job, but I don't know English. and that's
the problem.
shameful. That's shameful.
Do you think that within your point here, do you think that expresses, that is, only they have the masters on the expense of like mastering the language or having skills? Do you think that expresses some kind of an insecurity? Like the getting the masters is just a way to deal with that particular insecurity, which is, I can speak the language, I don't know anything about the language, or I'm intermediate when I'm supposed to be masters, because it's called master, which is supposed to be
exactly mastery. Mastery, yeah.
Yes.
I wouldn't call it insecurity. I would just call it randomness. Like being random. Being random, not knowing where to go, not having a destination. Now, if there is something after the PhD, they would have done it.
Yeah.
They would have kept on.
Yeah.
It's not okay. So here, for example, let me just give them a piece of advice, if you may. Now we have different stages, different educational stages. We go to primary school in order to have the basics. Then we go to middle school in order for us to build a personality, build who we are, because that's teenagehood. And then we move on to high school. That is in order to be prepared for being an adult and so on and so forth. And then you go to university. That prepares you for the world, or the professional world. So now, if we talk about the span of time that we spend in this duration, it's 6 years plus 4, that's 10, 3, that's 13, and another 3, that's 16. So 16 years of education, of studying. I think it is more than enough for a person to start a junior position. Let's say a junior position. I'm not talking about a managerial position, because there's nobody that climbs the ladder or jumps up the ladder without going from the basics.
Sure.
So junior position. Let's say, for example, you assist a certain teacher in teaching. Why do you assist that teacher? Not for the salary, it's for the experience. It's at least to learn from that teacher how to teach. And then later on, you go to the next stage, which is you start being a teacher. All right. So you start being a teacher, and then later on, you need to, grow up in the, let's say, go up the ladder a little bit. So when you go up the ladder, you'll find a certain gap, a certain knowledge gap between you and the next level. Let's say, for example, if you'd like to go to be a university teacher, you have a lot of prerequisites in order for you to be able to enter university as a teacher. So what do I have to do? I have to take bachelor's, master's, PhD. I can take master's and start university, but you cannot be a university teacher unless you have a certain level of knowledge of what you can give. Now, what I see youngsters, and not everybody is going to be accepted at university to be a teacher. So what do they have to do? They have to go to the parallel business sector, which is the private sector. So the private sector does not believe in what you have as a certificate, or as a diploma, or as your major, or either you were the first in your class or the last in your class. They don't care about that. What they care about is the language. I mean, now, for example, I have an office and I want someone to be a receptionist, for example, and this receptionist needs to speak English. If they don't speak English, I'm not going to hire them. If someone comes without a diploma or without a certificate, I would accept them as long as they speak the language.
Sure.
But it doesn't matter if you have a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD.
And this is where I want to come to. You said in 2014, you said, okay, I'm going to put the project to further my studies on hold, going abroad to Dubai for 2 years or other places, and then come back. In those 2 years, what happened that pushed you to say, okay, first of all, I am not going for 2 years. This is going to be for how long now? Have you been?
Almost 9 years.
10 years.
Mm.
What happened there that convinced you that, okay, I'm going to focus more on developing my professional career. I'm going to focus more on developing my skills, so that we'll talk a bit later on about how you transitioned from being a teacher to becoming now a trainer and then to becoming a manager, right?
Yeah.
So what happened in that period that changed your mind? Was it the fact that when you had this licence, this diploma, then you went abroad and you found that you were accepted with your competence, that convinced you, okay, I can grow. There is room to grow here.
What I actually found out about here was the fact that it's all about skills. So the bachelor's degree is only a prerequisite for you to be able to teach. Later on, when you enter the market, you'll understand that it's neither about the bachelor nor about any certificate at all. The diploma secures your payment. However, what secures your salary or a higher salary here, especially in the UAE, is the fact that you have a skill, that you have a high skill. So they would, for example, if they would like to hire you here as a teacher, they would call you in for an interview, and then they would check your language. After that, they would ask you for a demo class. So that demo class is the one that determines your acceptance or refusal. So when I went on, with my career here in Dubai, I found out that there are different streams that we have never been told about.
For example,
soft skills, training the trainer, training teachers. There are so many things that you could. I mean, IELTS, for example, training IELTS.
For example,
it didn't exist there. Like especially back then in 2014. I never knew what the IELTS was. Yeah. I just heard about it. TOEFL. We just knew that it was in Algeria, and it was for like people that wanted to immigrate. But I never expected that I would train the IELTS. I would prepare people for the test. So that is something that makes a lot of money. Only if you prepare me for the IELTS and I get the score. So the value of education for me lowered a little bit down, and the value of expertise and experience and professionalism and salary higher a bit.
And how do you think now, education meaning diploma, of course, and diplomas, how do you think that you can gain, in your experience, this expertise without having to go through the traditional master's, PhD, etc.? For example, you said you didn't know anything about the IELTS, which is the case of most of us. I heard about the IELTS in 2014, I think, or 13, something like that. Took a training in 2015, the IELTS, for a month with 2 British trainers. I'm training right now IELTS for Algerians and even foreigners. And so I know what you are talking about in terms of value. But since this is not something that is offered by universities here in Algeria, for example, in terms of training, how do you think anyone can reach that expertise that you are talking about without having to go through the traditional streams of a diploma that, unfortunately, for a lot of people has proven to be a path towards unemployment, or a path, or worse, towards that is being mediocre in the language, in the case of English, of course.
Here, what we gotta think about is actually choosing or defining the career path. So what career path are you gonna take after university? Once we frame the career path, we'll know what to take later on. It's a cycle. So for example, now you'd like to be an ESL teacher or an EFL teacher. What's next? Am I going to be an EFL teacher for my whole life, or am I going to be an ESL teacher for my whole life? That's not going to be the case, of course, especially in cities like Dubai.
Yeah, and especially if you are ambitious.
Yeah. So you need to know what's next always. So once you know what's next, you will have a lot of certificates. Trust me, a lot of certificates that would give you the opportunity to work for international companies in different stuff that you never imagined before. For example, I never imagined to train people in customer service. There's just an example. How do I train people in customer service? Is by having the skill of teaching or training, and by having the language. If you don't have these two, you're not going to be able to do any different than the English language, right?
But that's
so IELTS.
But that's my question. How do you transition? And this is why your career is very interesting. How do you transition from like ESL and EFL and English language? Okay, that you've mastered very well. This is the first thing that you have to do, I think, for anyone listening. But then how do you transition to, for example, going into customer service, or into management, or into, I don't know, human resources, something like that, which is a bit close to more how companies work, and how do you actually do that?
It's by seizing, or let's say targeting the opportunities. There is something called the opportunity hunters. So you hunt the opportunity wherever it is.
Sure.
Especially in the field. For example, IELTS, as I mentioned the IELTS before. So IELTS is a point of weakness for people. They're not professionals, so they would like to immigrate. They have an opportunity, elsewhere, in Canada, in the in the UK, sorry, in anywhere in the world. So what is their point of weakness? It is the IELTS. So when they hear about the IELTS, they get freaked out. Why? Because it's a prerequisite. So if you don't have the IELTS, you cannot go and for example, complete your higher education. You cannot pursue your higher education. You cannot, for example, immigrate. You cannot meet your family overseas. You cannot do a lot of things. So
Sure.
IELTS is very important. So you come and say, let me show you a way to get you from 4.5, for example, to 7.0. So if you master this part, if you specialize in something that is actually helpful for a lot of people, you find a solution. All right, it's about finding the solution. So if you find a solution for people, you're gonna grow, and you're gonna want to even grow it more. I know a lot of people that created pages, like on Instagram. For example, there is Dalilek on Instagram. I'm not trying to make any marketing for this guy, but he's really good on this. He undertook the IELTS, and he found a lot of challenges. He was not an English teacher by background, and he just wanted to help others in order to in order to pass the IELTS test and get the required score. Now he's very famous in Saudi Arabia. He is actually one of the top 2 people that give the IELTS in the region. This is something that you specialize in, but you need to know. You have to have a definite destination. What is my destination? Where am I going with this?
And in fact,
am
I think that what we are aiming at here is the fact that this guy or anyone else who has something special, in the sense that something that they master very well, something that they deliver very well, and something that gives results, gives outcomes. People don't care about how many diplomas you have, or what kind of diplomas you have, or where did you study. People again and again want value. That is, they want what you have in terms of result.
Let me tell you something here. If you, for example, take the masters and take the PhD and you don't know how to monetize them, it's just a waste of time.
Which is the case in most cases, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, like,
that's
you find someone with a PhD.
That's the truth. Yeah.
Just because of the circumstances, they couldn't find a job, so they just went and I don't know, taught in primary school or in middle school or whatever, like that. They because they did it randomly, because that was a random decision for them. That's why they ended up somewhere random where they didn't like it.
I see. I totally see. Yeah. Now, can you talk to me about, usually the first year in a foreign country is the most difficult one, because people have to adapt a little bit to the new environment, to the workplace, to the new mentality. Can you talk to me a little bit about your first year in Dubai? You immigrated from Algeria to Dubai, or you traveled, and you said, okay, I'm going to stay here for some time and see what are the opportunities. And then what happened in that first year? And perhaps this is going to give an idea to a lot of people who are interested in immigration and how to deal with the first year, which is, for a lot of people, a bit challenging and difficult.
I actually have found, or I have realized, that a lot of people would come and they would just want to have their foot on the ground, and that's what they say in Arabic. It's just that they wanted the first experience that comes in hand, and they seize it in order for them later on to find a better job. People would come here with a mindset of, let me just find a job. Okay, let me first find a job and then start looking for my suitable position. That is wrong. When I came here the first year, I found a job in 3 days. I was lucky.
3 days.
To find 3 days. Yeah.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to find that job, and it was the first time for me to be at an international medium, or in an international medium, and that medium actually taught me a lot, especially when you find an American, a British, a Polish, a Syrian, whatever, like working
multinational environment, right?
Right. And each one has a different mindset. Each one has a different way of thinking about the job, or about what we did back then. So I was the youngest, and I was the first Algerian that everybody met. That's what they told me.
This is where, can you specify the company?
Direct English, yes, Direct English.
This was a school?
Yeah, institute.
A private school for teaching and learning English, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Here, institutes are a bit different from our institutes back in Algeria. The institutes here give you trainings in everything. Like, they give you training in soft skills, they give you training in languages, they give you training in
so languages are like a department, if you will, or
yes,
a section.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. exactly.
Okay.
So when I did that, I the first year was my discovery phase. First of all, I had a problem with the Arabic dialect. I had a problem with understanding people and people understanding me. Well, I could understand people, but people couldn't understand me, especially when I spoke in Arabic. Everybody wanted me to speak only in English because they didn't understand me anyways. So it was pretty rough, okay, especially coming from somewhere where everybody knows everyone, okay, like from ورقلة. Dubai is very big, you know, like especially when it comes to buildings, and if you'd like to go from one point to another, you take at least 30 minutes
Sure.
drive. So yeah, it was hectic for me. It was like very fast paced. And you know us back in ورقلة, we are very slow paced. We're very laid back.
Sure.
People here are on fire. They're on the move always. So
how did you adapt to that? I'm interested really in how did you adapt to that? Was it something that, because when I usually talk to my guests, they all describe the intensity, like you are, of their experiences, and how that intensity was like a fast track to learning. And so was it the case for you? Did that like being thrown in the middle of all of this like fast pace and these different challenges, was that something that motivated you to explore the best in you and to work hard, or what was it like?
To be honest, you know, like the first year, it was pretty hard, and I felt bad about myself, you know, a little bit. I didn't really say, wow, let me do it, let me jump in. I was freaked out. I mean, like, do I have to fly like these people? Do I have to stress myself out all the time? Do I have to be in a rush, you know, always? I mean, that is too much. That's a lot of stress. So until I could blend in and find my way into doing stuff like that, it's because 95% of people work hard. And you just need to work smart. It's not about the effort that you make.
Sure.
It's about how you do it. You know, like you don't have to be involved in all the fast-paced, you know, society. You don't have to be like them in order to be able to win. You can just be different. You can just be who you are, you know, and you can win. You can win.
So work smart then became your like motto, I guess. And from here, you, in these 9 years, you started, and I was looking at the different positions that you've held, I think, at different institutions and institute and schools. You've changed from an ESL, EFL teacher to a soft skills trainer, and then now to manager. So how did this transition come about? Was it bearing in mind that you had in mind that you are going to work smart?
So first of all, you know, the thing that I did here in Dubai was actually, that I found out, was actually not staying in the same company. If you stay in the same company, you're gonna salary-wise, you're gonna be given an increment, but that increment is with a limited percentage. However, if you move from one company to another, and the competition is very high, you know, companies know what kind of employees you have, or who is your best seller, or who is your hot shot. So if
this
you
is
are
the competition. The competition is so hard that they know
it's
that,
fierce.
and they Okay.
It's
It's
fierce.
cutthroat,
It's fierce.
as they say. It's
Yes, it is.
cutthroat, huh?
It is. It is. You know,
Uh-huh.
at a certain
So
at a
how
certain
did you deal with that? That's, I think, very
yeah,
important too.
I
Uh-huh.
used that to my advantage.
Mm-hmm.
The first time that I learned about soft skills training was actually, the HR of the company came to me and said, Faris, we have a course for you, and it's going to be with this company because there is a corporate, like training. So this institute hires a teacher or a trainer for another company for its employees in order to develop them. So they asked me for that, and I said I never did it, but I'm sure that I can make it. Then was the first time that I learned not to say I don't know.
Mm.
I learned to say I learned to not say I don't know. So you just say I know, okay, and then you take your time and do the research, and that's where English comes in handy. So
Mm.
they asked me to do a customer service training, then what was that? Sales training, and then they asked me for a criminology training, and they asked me for a lot of different types of trainings that I've never heard of before.
Mm.
So what I had to do was to take a month. Okay, they give you this ahead of time, so I had to take a month and do my research,
Research.
learn a lot about every single bit of it.
Mm.
Um, the first one was a hit. It was great. Um, the second one was great, and then I said, wait a minute, why don't I specialize in one of these? Why don't I just get deeper in one of these? Because I always wanted to use English as a tool, as a
As a
key.
tool. Mm.
Yes. So use it as a tool in order for me to be able to train something else. Um, I went into sales training, and then I went into leadership training, and then I went into what do you call it? There was something else that I did with Al Futtaim here, automotive, and then the American University here. So I did a lot of trainings that were related to what I wanted next, to the next level. Next
You
level
mean
for me
you mean
was
you did a lot of trainings? You mean you
I
delivered the
trained them.
trainings, or you trained yourself in? You delivered.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a bit smart about it because if you get trained in something, especially if you would like to take it as a specialty in here, it should be in parallel with working on like or in that field. For example, you're in sales, and you get trained on sales. So I mean the same time. You don't have to be trained on sales and then you become a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
If there is an opportunity for you to become become a salesperson, and then at the same time you can learn. So in training, it's something else. In training, if you're a trainer, you can just make your researches and make a material, create
Mm.
your own material.
Mm.
Once you create your own material, you can propose that to a certain authority, and they would say, okay, we like the material, so we'd like you to deliver it. There is no book. I mean, you don't have to
Yes.
have a book.
And
You
you
could
don't
just
have to have you don't have to have like a certificate, or you don't have
no.
to have like a diploma. And this is where we come back to the importance of value. That is, the value is in what you have designed as a program, and also in your value in the market in terms of someone who has worked over the years at companies, or who has proven that he has a great record of being a good trainer, that is, people happy with his trainings, etc. Is that correct?
Correct, yes, because I believe delivery is an art.
Mm,
Delivering anything is about communication. Like
sure.
if the person understands what you're saying in a very simple way, in their own language, I mean, they would be very happy to hear from you more because that would relate. When you, it's the same thing as if you go to a level 1 English class and you keep speaking in English. I mean, nobody understands you, and you'll make people hate it. So you need to simplify everything, and make them think that they know and they can understand it and they're able to learn it. Okay, and then we can move on with the level. So what you got to do in this field, or in the teaching and training field, and then I move to coaching, which I'll tell you about later on. So teaching and training fields are related. The practices are the same. However, the training is more practical. The teaching is more theoretical. So the practical part of the training is still related to teaching. When it comes to theory, when it comes to delivery, you deliver the information first. So the difference between teaching and training, for people that don't know, teaching is all about giving. Training is about giving and seeing the result at the same time. So I teach you something, and I would like you to practice it in front of me, group work, okay, or I don't know. Each person comes, to the board and gives a presentation. So that's training. I'm training you to do something.
Yeah. So you are really developing skills,
exactly,
instead of just delivering information. But you talked about how you transitioned later on also to coaching.
Yeah.
And so coaching is a bit the next level, of course, in after training. So what has been your experience with coaching, and what is the coaching market like in Dubai?
So the coaching market is pretty top dollar, but the thing is, I when I took coaching, I didn't take it in order to take it as a job. You get what I mean? Like, I wanted to use it in the training. So I wanted to use it as a tool, like English, and put them in one plate, okay, in order to give to the attendees. Coaching helped a lot in understanding the human behavior. This is number one. Understanding personalities.
But here, what is the difference between, for you and in your experience, and in the market in Dubai? What is the difference between training and coaching? For those, of course, listening or watching, they would like to know, when can I call myself a coach or a trainer? And then we'll come to how did you, in your case, blend the two, or use coaching to help or inform your training.
Right.
What is to be particularly a coach in the UAE or in the Middle East, for example?
Right. So there is teaching, training, coaching, consulting. Okay. So teaching is theory, as we said. You give information, you deliver knowledge. Training is you deliver knowledge and you expect practicalities. You expect, let's say, in return in the classroom or in the training room. So you expect practical things to be developed at the same time. For example, if I train you on public speaking, I expect on a certain part in public speaking, I expect you to grasp that and practice it. Then
show that you've learned it.
Exactly. Coaching is about you as a coach understanding. It's about understanding what the client needs and deepening the awareness. Deepening the learning and heightening the awareness. So deepening the learning means you understand yourself more, and that's what's got to happen in the universities back in Algeria. So we need to coach people in order for them to understand what they are good at, what they really want, to frame their destination, to know it, to know their path, their career path. So all of this is coaching. Coaching is about asking the right questions for the person to understand themselves more and heighten the awareness. Like now they are aware of the fact that they don't have to go to masters or to the next level of education until they, for example, finished a certain level of professionalism, and then after that they can move on to the master's degree. So this is coaching. Coaching is about deepening the learning about the person or about oneself, and heightening the awareness. And then comes consulting. Consulting is the next level as well. So consulting is about me, for example. I'm a novice teacher. I go to Mr. ورقلة and I say, I have this problem, for example, in my classroom, and I would like to ask you a few questions so that you help me overcome, for example, these challenges. So you, Mr. ورقلة, become a consultant for novice teachers, for example. Then comes the mentor. The mentor is somebody else. The mentor is somebody that gives you wisdom. Somebody
that inspires
wise.
you.
That inspires you, for example. So Mr. ورقلة is a rich guy that got his wealth out of teaching, and I'm a fresh graduate that wants to, for example, be a wealthy teacher. Okay, they're two opposite, right? No, okay, we can have that, no problem. So so Mr. ورقلة is a wealthy teacher, and I would like to take him as an example. So I go to Mr. ورقلة in order for him to teach me how he got his wealth. So then later on, he trains me on how to make that. Okay. So teach is what, train is how, coach is why, consult is about the process.
The process. I think this is a very good way. The way you have led this out is a very good way to look at all of these different ways of delivery and ways of making people aware of something or the other, ways of instilling skills, ways of raising awareness. And for, I think, there is a famous book called Rich Guy, Poor Guy, or no, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think.
Yes,
which he talks about. Which talk about the mentor, I think. And I guess my next question then related to all of this is, now currently you've moved then from all of these into managing, right? Because as we said at the very beginning, just to remind people, you are the managing director of Transforma Training Center. So now, how did you make this leap now? And how have all of the different things that we have talked about informed your current position and what you need in terms of skills, in terms of knowledge, in terms of day-to-day tasks, in terms of vision and strategy to come to becoming a managing director of Transforma Training Center?
One of the things that I've learned throughout my years here is if you would like to master something, you got to teach it. And that's what the Prophet, peace be upon him, said. خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. So, the best of you is who learned Quran and taught it. So Quran is something that is variable. You can put anything there. So you're going to be the best if you learn it and teach it. Like, for example, there is a course or a certain training that I've learned, that I've done my research upon, leadership. So leadership was one of the things that I have learned and applied in my trainings, and succeeded at that. So leadership and management were two, related things or techniques that I had to learn in order to train other people. But throughout training other people once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, I got to master them. So now if any person that comes out of a business administration, for example, field or major, talk to me, they would feel like I've done that I've been a student, or that I was majored in business administration. It's because I got deep into it because of the training background, teaching background. Because you, as a teacher, you don't take the thing superficially. You take it and you try to go deep in it. You try to get the details of it. In order to simplify it to other people, you have to understand it.
Sure.
Like now, for example, if you read a verses, from Quran or a holy book, you'll have to understand it in order for you to apply it. And when you apply it, people will have it in a simple way because you applied it. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So you need to go to tafsir, you need to go to a lot of stuff. So what I saw is that if you study something, you learn it, and then you apply it, you train it, you're going to be very good at it. Like you cannot tell me that I excelled at English before teaching it.
Sure.
Never.
Yeah.
You can excel at it only if you teach it, if you give it to other people, and try it in anything else, like I don't know, physics, math, whatever, geography. Once you start teaching, you start digging for more information because you wanna make a good impression.
Sure. And this is what you think, of course, has cemented your position now as a manager, right? Yeah.
Because they saw that in my character. They saw that in, especially when they noticed that you have a leadership charisma, management charisma. You follow up on your things. You fight for what you want, for what you need.
So this is again not, when we talk about managing director or something like that, this, we usually think that this comes out of, usually that is in our stereotype, comes out of or is a consequence of some kind of a diploma or some kind of a certificate. Not necessarily. That can be a plus. But that's not what usually employers are looking for. And
now, after like 2 years, 3 years of this experience, I'm planning to take the MBA. Now, after that.
Sure. Because that was exactly my next question. Subhanallah, I was going to ask you exactly that, which is, do you feel now that with the experience, we come back to 2014, where you put the masters on hold, you put further in your studies on hold, and then you realize that, okay, I'm going to take my next step into studies when I feel like I need to fill a gap. After all of these years, now, do you feel like there is a gap now that justifies getting the next certificate or the next diploma?
Certainly.
And that's the MBA?
Yeah.
Explain to people what is MBA.
MBA is a Master's of Business Administration. In order for you to master the business administration, you need to take the MBA. MBA teaches you strategies on how to manage businesses, and different businesses, no matter what kind, no matter what field. So what justifies that is actually, if I see me as Faris, this is a personal thought. When I see that there is a diploma that could be monetized, I would go for it. For example, the coaching certificate it could be monetized. Okay, I could use it because it's from ICF, International Coaching Federation. So I could take that as a career path. So I would be able to monetize, make money out of it. If you cannot make money out of your certificate and you just stick it to the wall, I mean, that is a failure. It's either you did not learn how to monetize that certificate, or it's just because it was random. That's why it's on your wall.
Yeah, and so now we come to the point in the journey where you see, for you now, where you see where this is going, right? By getting this MBA, and remember that we have started with a love for English, in English language teaching, then in training, and then in coaching, and then in managing, and now you want to get the MBA, and this is in order for you to fill in a gap that would help you get further in your career. And so my last question for you is, what would be then your advice to the young, especially the young graduates?
My advice would be in terms of education. I mean, like, each person has their own way of thinking about it. But my advice, my personal advice, that I would always, I wouldn't dare to generalize, is if you would like to take this as an educational process that you enjoy, then go ahead and do it. But if you'd like to make money out of it, which is, the point that is for everyone, especially those who are fresh graduates and because they wanted it. They wanted this major, not because of their GPA, right? Because they wanted this and they wanted English, they wanted to study this. So, and other fields as well. Like, if you still see that you are not capable enough of your major, do not jump to the next step.
Yeah.
Master it first, and master it, because if you don't master it, you're not going to be able to monetize it. Sure. Once you're able to monetize this educational experience, you move on to the next step. You move on to the next educational experience in line.
And especially in the case of English language, while you are studying, for example, a licence, and you are about to graduate, make sure that you graduate with the level of English that matches your diploma. That's the most important thing, because the value, and as you said, you can monetize your English language even without any diploma, if you are interested in the English language. As you said, anyone can become a teacher if they have a CELTA. CELTA, the certificate for teachers of English, can be done in 1 month. Can you imagine? 1 month. 1 month you can teach English anywhere you want. You don't have to spend, you don't even have to spend 3 years. But in order to be accepted in the CELTA program, you have to have C1 level in English. That is your level in English, and you, of course, you take an interview before you are accepted into the program to make sure that there is no doubt, no problem in your English. That's the most important thing. They are not taking you just because you have the money to take the CELTA. They are taking you first because you have the money, but first because you can speak English. And then we'll see about whether you can teach it, because the CELTA program, it's one or certificate is 1 month, but it's very intensive. And some people don't get it, don't get the certificate, they fail. And it has ranks. So there is A, and there is, so I guess the theme of our talk today and the advice that you have given to people here is be good at what you are doing. Be good beyond any kind of doubt. That's your most important certificate. That's your PhD. That's what will get you to places that you would dream of. And I think that by now you have been a good example of that. You don't need all of these different, diplomas and
It's just a paper in the end, it's the skill that matters.
It is, and it's very important for people to understand that. I don't know why the culture has made it so that it's all about the certificate and it's all about the diploma, but it's not about what you have in terms of skill or what you have in terms of proficiency. In our case, of course, in the language, which is what we have. When you say English language graduate, I expect proficiency in language. I don't expect something else. Well, anyway, Faris, this has been a blast. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer my questions that I think are going to be very, very helpful for the young who, of course, have graduated this year or have graduated years ago that still don't have a vision about their career, about their path. As you have said, it's very important to not do things randomly. Last word you want to say?
Well, I would like to thank you very much, Mr. ورقلة, because
thank you for doing this.
It's one of a kind, like the all the work that you've done, all that you're still doing is something that is out of this world. You're motivating people, you're pushing them, you're actually the one leading by example, which is amazing. Thank you so much for it, Mr. ورقلة, and thank you for
so much.
inviting me.
Thank you so much for doing this.
And hopefully we'll do more.
Yeah, we'll do more. Definitely. We'll now I know your I follow you on Instagram. You can tell people where to follow. Of course, later on I'll put this online and I'll put all your where people can find you on LinkedIn to follow your excellent and wonderful career and the excellent and wonderful things that you are doing to get inspiration. But most importantly, of course, I'm sure that we are going to do more episodes about specific aspects of the professional life. Today we have talked in general about your career, but we can talk about training, or we can talk about consulting, or we can talk about coaching, can talk about many different things.
Why not make workshops together, inshallah, in the future?
Sure, inshallah. Inshallah, we have many projects in the future, and we'd like to see you part of them, inshallah. Faris, thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
All the best.
Same here. Thank you. Likewise.
I'll see you soon. Hey, ladies and gents, thank you very much. I'll see you, inshallah, in the next episode. Salam.